The jungle was loud. Birds screamed in the trees. Drums beat in the village. Fire danced under the dark sky. The tribe stood in a big circle near the swamp pit. All eyes stared at the girl. Her name was Myra. She was the weakest girl in the tribe. Thin, quiet, slow. Her arms were tied with thick vines. Her legs shook. She had no family left, no friends, just the tribe. And their hate. The chief raised his hand. His voice roared. She brings shame. Feed her to the Croc. The crowd shouted back. To the Croc. To the Croc. Two big warriors grabbed Myra by her arms. She tried to speak, but her lips were too dry. She looked at the crowd, hoping someone would stop them. No one did. The warriors dragged her to the edge of the muddy pit. The water below was dark, still, but something moved inside. A ripple, a slow shadow. It was waiting. Myra whispered, "Please." But no one cared. One push, and she fell. Splash. The cold swamp swallowed her. She kicked weakly, trying to stay above water. But her hands were tied. Her dress was heavy. She sank once, twice. Then the water moved. Something huge stirred eyes. Yellow, wide, watching her. The Croc, a monster from the deep. Its head rose from the water, slow and silent. Mouth wide, teeth long as daggers. It slid toward her, ready to bite. On the edge of the pit, the tribe cheered. Suddenly, a scream came from above. But it wasn't Myra. It was a man. A human. He dropped from the trees like a stone. Landed right on the Croc's back with a loud crack. The beast thrashed in the water. The crowd gasped. The man was tall, strong, dressed in dark, torn clothes. He held a sharp blade in one hand. His other hand grabbed the Croc's back tight. He stabbed one straight into the Croc's eye. The beast roared. Water exploded. The man shouted, "Swim, girl!" Myra couldn't believe it. She turned and kicked with all her strength. Somehow, she reached a pile of rocks near the pit's wall. She climbed up, coughing hard. Behind her, the man fought the beast. He was fast. His blade flashed. The Croc twisted, trying to throw him off. But he held on like glue. The tribe stood in stunned silence. No one moved. No one spoke. Who was this man? Why was he here? Why did he save the weakest girl? The Croc dove deep. The man vanished under the water. Myra screamed. No. The water was quiet. For 5 long seconds, nothing. Then, another splash. The man shot out of the water, pulling something with him. The Croc's tail thrashed once and went still. The beast was dead. The man climbed out, soaked in blood and mud. He looked at Myra. "You okay?" She nodded. She didn't understand. Her heart was racing, her breath short. He turned to the tribe, still watching. He raised his voice. "Is this how you treat your own? Throwing children to monsters?" The chief didn't reply. He just stared. The man took Myra's hand. "Come." She followed, still shaking. The crowd stepped aside as he walked past them. No one stopped him. No one dared. That night, the drums stopped. The fire grew cold. And the tribe whispered the same question. Who is the human? Who rides Crocs and walks through warriors like wind? Myra sat by the fire, her knees close to her chest. Her skin was scratched, her clothes torn, but she was alive. The man sat beside her, sharpening his blade with a flat stone. Sparks jumped from the metal. His eyes were calm, like he had done this before, many times. She finally asked in a soft voice, "Why did you save me?" He didn't look at her. He kept sharpening, because no one else did. She looked at his arms. Scars, old wounds. Some deep, some faded. "You are not from here," she whispered. He smiled slightly. No. Then, why come here? He stopped, looked up. The fire reflected in his eyes. I came for something, but I didn't know I'd find someone tossed to a beast like garbage. Myra looked down. Her tribe had always treated her like she was nothing, weak, worthless, a mistake. But this man didn't flinch when he saw her. He jumped into death to save her. She asked, "What's your name?" He said, "Call me Gray." Gray, like storm clouds. From the trees above, quiet footsteps moved. The tribe was watching, spying, planning. Gray knew it. He leaned closer to the fire and whispered, "They'll come tonight." Myra's eyes widened. Why? They hate what I did. Saving you made them look weak. They are strong, she said. He shook his head. No, real strength doesn't fear mercy. She didn't understand all his words, but she felt them. He stood up and pulled a second knife from his boot. He handed it to her. I've seen the way you move. You're slow because you've been starving, not because you're weak. She didn't take the knife. I've never fought. Gray nodded. That's okay. Stay behind me. Then he vanished into the shadows. The night grew colder. Myra sat still, gripping the knife now. Her hands shook. Every crack of a twig made her heart race. Hours passed. Then she heard them. Whispers, footsteps. 5. Maybe 6 warriors. Coming close. She froze. A hand reached toward her shoulder, but it wasn't Gray. It was one of the tribe's hunters. His face was painted black, his blade raised. She screamed, and that was all Gray needed. He dropped from a tree above, landing on the man's back. The blade flew into the grass. Gray punched once. Twice, the warrior dropped. Another came rushing forward. Gray flipped him over his back. A third man stabbed forward, but Gray caught the wrist, twisted, and broke it in one motion. The remaining warriors stepped back, fear in their eyes. Gray stood in the firelight, breathing steady. I came here in peace, he said, his voice like stone. But if you touch her again, I'll teach you war. The warriors didn't answer. They ran. Myra couldn't speak. She was shaking again, not from fear, but from awe. Gray walked over, knelt in front of her. You okay? She nodded. He looked at the knife in her hand. Next time, hold it tighter. I was scared. Good, he said. Only fools feel nothing before a fight. She looked at him, truly looked. This man had no family here, no place in the tribe, but he fought harder than anyone she'd ever seen, and he had chosen to protect her. That night, Myra didn't sleep. She sat close to the fire, the knife near her lap. And in her heart, a strange thought bloomed. Maybe I am not as weak as they said. Morning came slow. Mist wrapped around the village like a ghost. The fire had turned to ash. The tribe stayed silent in their huts. No drums, no chants, no laughter, only fear. Gray stepped into the open clearing, carrying Myra in his arms. Her body was still weak, too tired to walk. But her eyes were sharp, now watching everything. He walked with calm steps, as if he belonged here, as if no one could stop him. The chief stood near the fire ring with his arms crossed. Warriors gathered behind him, spears in hand, but none moved. One elder spoke with a trembling voice. Why do you carry our shame through the center of the tribe? Gray didn't stop walking. He looked straight ahead and said, She's not shame. She's proof. Proof of what? That your ways are broken. A few gasps filled the air. Some warriors gripped their weapons tighter. The chief's jaw clenched. You speak like a leader. I speak like someone who's seen real strength, Gray said. And it doesn't come from fear. He reached the center, then slowly lowered Myra onto a stone bench. She sat, legs shaking, but her back straight. Gray turned to face the tribe. You all saw what happened in the pit. You threw her to die, but she lived. Not because of me, because she had the heart to survive. No, the chief barked. She was rescued by an outsider. Gray nodded. That's true. Atoka, look at her now. You see, weak Nisai see someone who faced death and didn't give up. One of the younger hunters muttered, why protect her? Gray turned slowly. His voice dropped low, because I once needed saving. And no one came. Silence spread like fire. Myra looked around. Faces she'd grown up with. Faces that had laughed when she was pushed. Now they looked confused, nervous, unsure. A little girl peeked from behind her mother's legs. She stared at Mira. Then, slowly, she smiled. It was small, but Mira saw it. And she smiled back. Just then, an old woman stepped forward. Her back was bent, her eyes cloudy with age. She reached into her shawl and pulled out a dried fruit. She walked to Myra and placed it in her lap. For strength, the old woman said. The chief shouted, she does not deserve enough. Gray's voice cut through the air like thunder. The tribe flinched. Gray pointed to the chief. If you want to throw someone to the Croc again, try me next. The chief didn't move. His hands curled into fists, but he said nothing. Gray sat next to Mira, resting one hand on his knee, the other near his blade. A young warrior stepped forward, nervously. You're not afraid of us. Gray smiled. I've faced worse things than angry men with sticks. The warrior blinked. You killed the swamp croc. I did. Can you? Teach us. Gray looked at Mira, then back at the warrior. Maybe. But only if you stop tossing your own into the pit. The boy nodded slowly. Later, as the sun rose higher, Gray and Myra sat alone under a tree. She bit into the fruit. Sweet, sticky. Her first real meal in days. You made them listen, she said. No, Gray replied. You did. Just by surviving. She chuckled. They used to laugh at me. He smirked. Now they laugh, 'cause they're nervous. She looked at him with wonder. You really think I can be strong? He stood up and held out his hand. I don't think. I know. And for the first time in her life, Mira stood without fear, holding the hand of the man who changed everything. The sun dipped low. Shadows stretched long across the jungle. Fires began to burn again in the village, but quieter now. No music, no cheers, just soft whispers in the dark. Gray sat on a log outside the old storage hut. Mira sat beside him, her fingers wrapped around a warm clay bowl of broth. She sipped slowly. It was the first time she'd been allowed to eat without permission. She didn't speak, neither did he. But the silence between them wasn't heavy. It felt safe. After some time, Mira asked in a small voice, Where are you from? Gray didn't answer right away. He stared into the fire as if remembering something far away. Far from here, he said. Across the sea, in a place where people wear chains, even if you can't see them. Myra tilted her head. Chains. He pulled up his sleeve. A faded mark was burned into his arm. It was shaped like a triangle with 3 dots inside it. Not tribal, not natural. They marked me when I was young, he said. Told me I belonged to them. That my life had no value unless I obeyed. Her eyes went wide. Slavers. He nodded. Not the kind you know. These were worse. They didn't just bind your body. They broke your mind. Mira placed her bowl down. How did you escape? Gray's jaw clenched. One day, I saw a boy chained to a wall, too weak to cry. I gave him my food. They beat me for it. But the next day, he smiled. He paused. The fire crackled. That smile saved me, he whispered. Made me realize, kindness is power. Real power. Mira watched him closely. That's why you saved me. he turned to her. Yes, I've seen too many thrown away. I won't let it happen again. Mira looked down at her hands. They were small, dirty, shaking, but when she looked at them now, they felt different. Like they could hold something strong. I want to be like you, she said. Gray shook his head gently. No, be better than me. Suddenly, footsteps approached. A young girl ran toward them, holding something wrapped in cloth. It was food, more food. She handed it to Mira and ran back into the dark. Mira opened the cloth. Roasted roots, berries, and even dried meat. Her hands trembled. Why? Why would she give me this? Gray smiled. Because you survived. Now you're not just a weak girl. You're a symbol. A symbol of what? He stood, of change. But change never comes without danger. In the shadows behind the huts, the chief stood alone. His eyes locked on Gray and Mira. His pride was wounded, his control slipping. He turned to the hunter beside him. Get the others. Tonight, we remind the tribe who gives the orders. Gray led Mira back to a small hut near the edge of the village. It was old, unused, and broken, but it had a roof. He cleared a spot for her to rest. You sleep, he said. I'll watch. She nodded. You always watch. He looked at the stars above. Ka, I know what happens when no one does. As Myra drifted off, her last thought was simple. He hates chains. But somehow, he made her feel free. And just beyond the hut, in the blackness of the trees, the warriors gathered in silent, spears in hand, rage in their hearts. Tomorrow would not be quiet. The jungle wind howled like a warning. Leaves danced in the darkness. Even the insects grew quiet. Inside the broken hut, Mira slept curled in the corner, her chest rising slow and soft. A blanket of old cloth wrapped around her like a cocoon. Outside, Gray stood barefoot in the dirt. His eyes were half closed, but he was not asleep. He was waiting. He felt it in the air movement. Anger, steel, and bone weapons brushing leaves. The sound of breathing from men trying too hard to be silent. They were close. He crouched beside the wall and touched the earth with his fingers. Cold, wet, still soft from the swamp nearby. Perfect. The chief's voice echoed low from the trees. Make it quick. Kill the outsider. Drag the girl back. The old ways return by sunrise. 5 warriors crept toward the hut. 1 from the left, 2 from behind, 2 from the front. Gray took a deep breath, then vanished into the dark. The first warrior stepped forward, and the earth beneath him gave way. Snap! A pit trap deep, hidden by leaves, swallowed him whole. The second tried to shout, but a boot slammed into his face from the side. Gray spun, kicked, and knocked him down in one strike. The third raised a spear. Gray caught it mid-air, twisted, broke the shaft across his knee. Then he said, calm as stone, you had your chance. The 2 warriors at the front froze. One ran, the other charged. Gray ducked low, swept his leg, and flipped the man into the mud. He groaned, unmoving. Behind him, the hut door opened slowly. Mira stood there. She was barefoot, her hair messy, but she held the small knife Gray had given her. More are coming, she said. Gray nodded. Good, let them. Within minutes, the fire circle lit up. Torches were raised. The chief stood tall in the center, shouting for order. He pointed at Gray and Mira. This outsider breaks our law. He poisons our youth. Take him now. But something was different. The villagers didn't cheer. They hesitated. Mira stepped forward, not behind Gray but beside him. I was nothing to you, she shouted. You threw me away. I survived. A child whispered, she lived. An elder nodded, and she speaks. The chief growled. Silence. Gray dropped a sack at the chief's feet. Inside it broken spears. Stained with mud and blood, the weapons of the men who tried to kill him. They attacked at night, Gray said. Cowards don't lead. They hide. A low murmur passed through the crowd. The chief reached for his own spear, but Gray was faster. He stepped in front of Mira, blade raised. You want war? He asked. Right here, in front of your people. The chief raised his hand, then stopped. The warriors behind him slowly lowered their weapons. One by one, they stepped back. No orders, no fight, just silence. Gray didn't smile. He didn't need to. He turned to Mira. They're listening now. She took a deep breath and stepped into the center. I don't want revenge, she said, but I won't bow anymore. Not to fear. Not to you. And with those words, the fire cracked higher. The people didn't cheer, but they didn't walk away. They stayed, watched, and began to understand. That night, the chief sat alone in his hut, rage burning in his chest. He whispered to himself, the girl stands tall, but I'll break her yet. And far away in the jungle's deep places, something ancient stirred. Something waiting for Myra. The next morning came soft and strange. The village was quiet. No commands, no punishments. Just eyes watching Myra wherever she walked. Some held fear, some held wonder. But no one dared speak against her now. She was no longer the weak one. Gray stood beside her, sharpening his blade again. The rhythm of stone on metal was steady, calm. But his eyes were looking elsewhere toward the jungle. Mira noticed. You keep watching the trees, she said. I'm not looking for enemies, he replied. I'm searching for something else. She stepped closer. What? He looked at her. A door. One your mother told you about. Under the river stones. Mira froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. How? How do you know that? Gray's voice turned quiet. 'Cause your mother wasn't just a tribeswoman, was she? Myra shook her head slowly. She spoke of a temple, buried deep. Said it wasn't for the strong. Said it would call the broken. Gray whispered, and it has. They packed what little they had. A rope, 2 blades, and a bag of dried roots. Gray led. Myra followed. They moved through thick jungle, the kind where light barely touched the ground. Roots twisted like snakes. Vines brushed their arms. The air was heavy with silence. By midday, they reached a small river. The water was shallow, stones covering the bottom like scales on a serpent. Myra stopped. This is it. Gray nodded. It feels right. He stepped into the cold stream. Water rushed around his boots. He dropped to his knees and brushed aside the stones. Nothing. Then Mira knelt beside him. She placed her hand flat on a mossy rock. It pulsed. She gasped. The stone sank, slowly, like it had been waiting for her touch. The water drained down in a perfect circle. The riverbed opened into a spiral staircase made of glowing stone, hidden for centuries beneath the mud. Myra stared in shock. It's real. Gray smiled. You were meant to find it. They moved down the stairs, step by step, light growing stronger with each turn. The air was dry, filled with the scent of old dust and forgotten power. At the bottom stood a chamber, round walls carved with ancient symbols. In the centaur a pedestal. On it sat a glowing crystal sphere, floating just above a metal base. It hummed softly. Mira stepped forward. Gray did not. She turned. Aren't you coming? He shook his head. This isn't my place. She stepped closer to the sphere. As she reached out, images flickered inside at her mother's face. The crocodile, the tribe, Gray. And then herself, standing tall in glowing armor. She gasped. What is this? She asked. Gray answered from the shadows. A memory vault, left by your ancestors. It chooses only one. Mira touched the sphere. A pulse of light burst through the chamber. The symbols on the walls lit up, The pedestal sank into the ground, and Myra fell to her knees. But she did not scream. She laughed. The light wrapped around her like water. It flowed into her skin, her bones. Her body began to change, not shape, not size, but something inside. Strength, fire, a power she never knew was hers. When the light faded, she stood up. Strong, still, Myra, but different. Gray looked at her and nodded. It chose you. She looked at her hands. Why me? Because you were broken, he said. And you still stood. Above them, the jungle shook. The tribe felt the pulse of power rise from the ground. And the chief, sitting in his hut, opened his eyes wide with fear. The sky turned red as evening fell. But the fire that lit the village didn't come from the sun. It came from her. Myra walked out of the jungle, slow and calm. Leaves parted for her. Animals grew still. Birds stopped singing. Even the wind seemed to move aside. Her feet were bare, but her steps shook the ground. She wore no armor. She held no weapon. But the glowing lines on her skin, still warm from the vault's light, were stronger than any blade. Behind her, Gray followed silently watchful. Ready? Ahead, the tribe gathered in fear. The chief stood at the center, gripping a heavy axe. His face twisted with pride and hate. You left a girl, he growled. You come back pretending to be more? Myra didn't stop. I am more. But I didn't pretend. You think power makes you worthy? He spat. She shook her head. No. I stood when you threw me to die. That made me worthy. The villagers looked between them. Some were trembling. Others stepped closer to Myra. The chief saw it, and he hated it. She is cursed, he shouted, touched by light that is not ours. This is not our way. An old woman stepped forward. The same one who gave Myra fruit. Her voice was thin but firm. Then maybe. Your way is broken. Whispers followed. The chief roared. He raised the axe and charged. Myra didn't move. At the last second, Gray stepped forward, blade drawn. But Myra lifted one hand. No, she said. This is mine. The chief swung the axe with all his rage. She caught it, with one hand. The blade froze in the air. Her fingers glowed. The metal trembled. Then it shattered. The chief stumbled back, eyes wide. Myra stepped close. I feared you once, she said, her voice calm. Not anymore. She touched his chest with 2 fingers. Light sparked. He fell to his knees, not hurt, but powerless. The tribe stared, frozen. Then one warrior dropped his spear. Another kneeled, then more, until the fire circle was filled with bent heads. Not in fear, but in respect. Gray stood at the edge, arms crossed, watching, waiting. Myra looked at the people who had once mocked her, hurt her, thrown her to the Croc like trash. And she said only one thing. No more pits. No more chains. The people stayed silent, but in their silence was agreement. The chief was carried away, still alive, but no longer a leader. That night, the fire in the center of the village burned brighter than ever. Myra sat beside Gray, sharing food with the same hands that once trembled. Children came close, asking questions. Mothers offered gifts. Fathers listened. You did it, Gray said quietly. Myra looked up. No, we did. He smiled. Will you lead them now? She paused, then nodded. Yes, but not with fear. With fire, Gray stood. Then my work is done. You're leaving, she asked, surprised. He nodded. There are other girls being thrown to Crocs. Other tribes that need a fire. She stood with him. Will I see you again? Maybe, he said. But you won't need me. He turned toward the jungle. She called after him. What should I tell them you were? He looked back once, a soft grin on his face. Just a man who hated chains. and then he vanished into the trees. Mira turned to face her people. The weakest girl was gone. Only the first Fireborn stood now.